Hello everybody, welcome back to Comedian MTG. My name is Ian. We are doing our part 2 of A Tale of Two Turbos series where I took two Turbo Naz / Turbo Aggressive style CEDH decks and brought them to CEDH tournament. This was another tournament. It was a smaller one again. It was around 28 players, I believe, at the end. It was in the Bearded Dragon in New Jersey, which was a cool experience to go there. It was their first CEDH tournament. Shout out to DJ who helped run the whole thing. But yeah, so I was challenged, for those who didn't watch my Rogsai video, to play some turbo in CEDH, as mid-range is more of my style, a lot of creature combo decks, stuff like that. So I had some friends, some peers, basically be like, hey, you should try playing a Turbo Naz deck, see what happens. So I top forward with Rogsai the day before this tournament, and then this was the Sunday of that weekend. This is a 4-round event, cut to top 10. That being said, while you're here on YouTube, make sure to hit that like button, that subscribe button. If you want to keep seeing me push this content, if you want to keep seeing me try new decks, experience new things, make more tournament reports about decks I've never played before so that y'all can have the information and the deck techs associated with these decks, please feel free to hit that like button, that subscribe button. It's free and it helps out the channel so very much. If you want to go over to patreon.com/comedianmtg, I have been spending a lot of time over the past few weeks making some adjustments on there. I'm trying to be more active on it. I am working with other content creators to try and get a bunch of tiers that I know that I can do as a solo creator. I've contacted an artist who's going to be helping us do merch for our stuff. So there's a lot of really cool stuff coming on the way. I'm looking into some short form content. It costs a lot of money. So if y'all are kind of hoping to continue to support this channel and hoping for more content, any support right now is a huge deal. So thank you very much for everyone who does support currently. Y'all are awesome. As I mentioned, I just restructured a bunch of tiers. Now the $10 patrons actually get videos early. So even before I throw them up on YouTube, even before they have a thumbnail or a title, I'm just like throwing them out there, telling y'all what they're about, and then throwing them up actually on YouTube when they're all pristine and ready. But everyone gets the raw, well, I guess edited, not raw, but like they get the videos early. So everyone $10 and up gets that perk, and it's been really cool. I'm really glad and thankful so much for the Patreon community. Sorry, I know that was a bit of a tirade, but it's very much on the mind. So. Let's talk about this list. So this is my deck I call Florida Man Turned into Dragon Insists on Sacrificing Local Goblin. This is one of the deck names I'm pretty proud of, not gonna lie. So basically this is a Korvold Turbo Naz deck with a few mid-range selections and a few pieces that I personally wanted to swap in a little bit. The original shell, as I kind of left there in the notes up that way, was inspired by Mad King's list, who top forward Hunt City with it. I definitely have made my own adjustments to it, but between watching his post-tournament summary and doing a bunch of talk with other Corvold pilots, I kind of was able to mess around with some numbers, figure out a list that was comfortable for me, and I will say I had a ton of fun playing the deck. It's definitely, a little more aggressive than the decks that I'm used to, but as opposed to Rogsai, this definitely feels a little bit more in my wheelhouse, in the sense that I'm doing the turbo stuff, but it's turbo creature stuff, right? You're turboing out dockside and playing a bunch of crunchy, sack this thing to do this thing, and a lot of synergy based stuff that is definitely stuff I enjoy a little bit more. It's a little bit lighter on some of the I hope that they don't hit this plays, and more of the all right, find my window, execute my combo kind of plays. So one thing that I'll immediately call out in my version is that we're at the point where, for as long as Corvold has been around, people have been you don't need to play Squee Food Chain, right? That's been the thing, is oh, the combo's kind of bad. The Squee and Food Chain, you don't really need it. For those who don't know, Corvold is a food chain outlet. Basically, it's not as clean as a normal traditional food chain outlet. Basically, instead of just recasting Corvold over and over again, you have to, make infinite creature mana, cast Squee, cast Corvold, sack the Squee, draw a card, play the Squee out of the graveyard, exile the Corvold, right? Basically, you're doing the same thing, except for just you add a few more steps in there. And then you just assemble some sort of kill with the cards remaining in your deck. But luckily, I've noticed with this deck, compared to some other food chain options, is the stuff layers so well on top of itself that you really have to exile a lot of good stuff for you to feel like you like threw away your win with the food chain combos, which I think is really nice. We are not playing Divine Consultation in this version. I know some people who have played the food chain version play it. I'm just on Tainted Pact. For me, it was more like I have a 2-card combo in the deck. I'm not playing it like a Kazuru Kima where I'm like end step Forbidden Tutoring, right? It's more so because Tainted Pact is just a good tutor, right? the Forbidden Tutor aspect with when it goes into like food chain stuff really didn't come up too much. I'm on Manamorphose in this deck. I just found that Manamorphose in my Jund plus turbo decks, right? So anything that has green, red, and black in it that's doing turbo stuff, I've really liked Manamorphose. It's just a quick way to get a little bit of filtering, a little bit of card draw. It came up like once during the tournament. I didn't really see it, but you know, it's good for in situations where you have like, you've got a bunch of red mana and then you can't filter into Adnaz, or you know, you have a red and a colorless and you need 2 red for a Final Fortune. You know what I mean? There's things where it comes up, and I think that's kind of the good side of it, right? It's good filtering for those stormy turns where you're trying to like actually convert into a win, especially like post Nas, right? So Manamorphose is one I'm happy with. Does not see as much play as usual. I also put Rending Volley in the list, which is like, I feel like becoming like a signature spell of mine at this point. I just think it's a super solid card, and it takes out a lot of the more problematic creatures in the format that I think a deck like Corvold will be worried about. Drannith being a pretty big one. The only miss for me is like Opposition Agent, right? But it hits, you know, Ranger Captains and doesn't hit Grand Abolisher. Obviously the turn it comes down, right? But if somebody plays Grand Abolisher and thinks that they have it safe, kind of just vibing there, then it definitely hits that as well. I did find that this card came up once or twice. It was useful, and I'm happy to include it. Definitely more effective in a deck like Atalia, right? But like, yeah, I was happy with Rending Volley. Uncounter ability is kind of huge. You know, there's maybe a world where you know, play something like a Fatal Push or whatever in the slot instead, and I wouldn't really blink twice at that. We've sort of talked about a couple of the cards that I am playing that are like a little bit different than most people. We can come back to that. Let's talk about Corvold in general. I think that might help a little bit with some of this decision-making conversation. So Corvold, the idea of this deck, right, is to, I mean, 99% of the time, it's a turbo Dockside deck, right? Corvold's interaction with Dockside is absolutely insane, right? Like you have a Dockside X equals 5 or something, that's 5 mana and 5 cards. Just for playing your Dockside and getting crunched, right? And then like there's so many times where you like play a Dockside before Corvold, then you play Corvold, you sack the Dockside to the Corvold ETB, you draw a card, you reanimate Dockside, that comes with more treasures, you get more cards. Like it's just the times when you get the Dockside, the deck feels untouchable, right? It just like you just have all of this layering and just like crunch, draw, make mana, float mana, make more treasures, reanimate Dockside, do it again, do, right? Like that stuff is the bread and butter of the deck, right? The thing that like makes the deck basically the best Dockside deck in the format. It's like between this and Sisei, right? Which, you know, makes sense. We then have, you know, lines in the deck. As I mentioned, we have the Squee Food Chain lines. We also have Ruthless Technomancer. So Ruthless Technomancer plus Dockside plus Skirk Prospector or any sack outlet, but I think Skirk is our only one. I guess, yeah, you can also do this with Mayhem Devil in much the same way where you shoot your own Dockside to execute the loop. So as long as your opponents are making 4 treasures, the Technomancer loops with either, once again, Mayhem Devil or Skirk Prospector, which is pretty solid. I think that's definitely obviously like a pretty nice combo. And then, you know, sometimes with Technomancer, you're like, okay, cool. This is my first cast of Corvold. I'm playing my Dockside, crunching it, playing it, crunching it. Okay, I have 1 tutor to kind of make something happen. Well, let's go get Technomancer. My Corvold has like 15 power at this point, right? Play it, sack the Corvold, make 15 treasures, use 7 to recast Corvold. Now I still have 8 treasures just kind of hanging out, you know? So it's very easy to make this deck like really pop off. That's kind of the idea. So this is the Technomancer lines, we talked about the Squee Food Chain lines, and then the other parts of the deck are just like Turbo Nas stuff, right? So we are playing Ad Nauseam, we have our Underworld Breach. Now you may be saying, but Ian, there's no Brain Freeze. And it's like, yes, this is a Grinding Station Breach deck, right? We don't have blue, meaning that we are doing the tighter Grinding Station lines, but with the way it works with Corvold in particular is kind of nice, right? Because every time you sack an artifact with Corvold in the battlefield, not only are you milling 3, but you're also netting a card into your hand, right? So Grinding Station actually works better in this deck with your commander out than it does in most decks where Grinding Station is present. Not that Grinding Station isn't good on its own, it is. But then you usually get to a point where you assemble some sort of like Praetor's Grasping for your opponent's Thassa's Oracle sort of gameplay at that point. Or, you know, there's other lines that you can go for. You can assemble any of the 2-card combos that I talked about previously, which is also very easy. You can do stuff where you like loop Bowmasters over and over again. There's a lot of ways with a Grinding Station loop that you can like actually get things going. So yeah, that's kind of the plan. And then you'll notice like there's just so much reanimation in this deck, right? You have Reanimate, you have Unearth, you have things like Animate Dead and Necromancy, right? Not to mention the fact that you have like, you know, something as simple as like a Noxious Revival, right? Like this card straight up won me one of the games because I was able to like entomb Dockside and then Noxious put it on the top, right? So there's a lot of ways to just like get Dockside in the bin, get Dockside in your hand, get Dockside in the graveyard, get it back out of the graveyard, get it in the graveyard, get it back out of the graveyard, right? It is just kind of silly, right? And also like even Noxious Revival becomes like a 1-card combo to reanimate Dockside in a sense, right? Because with Corvold, you like play Corvold, sack Dockside, right? In response to the Corvold trigger, you can just Noxious Revival, put Dockside right back on top of your library, and then you're drawing another Dockside again, drawing a bunch of cards off the treasures, playing it. It gets very silly with how tight you can layer this deck, and I think that is the thing that is going to separate like a good Corvold pilot from great Corvold pilot, is like when you're getting into the nitty gritty of like storming off with Corvold, is like figuring out where your pivot points are going to be, how to like sort of optimize the storm aspect of the deck in that sense. And then also the other big thing, and then once again I will shout out Mad King as he called this out in his Punt City performance, but it's like this thing I'm noticing with turbo decks in general right now, which is the idea of just because you can go off doesn't mean you should go off, right? This notion where it's like, you know, yeah, this is a turn 2 deck. Corvold can win turn 2 if your opponent gets like a crazy Dockside line, or if it has like the nutty Turbo Nas hand, right? Like if it gets that hand, then like, yeah, you can do the turn 2 and like pop off and it's fast and it explodes and it's like, but the definition of a turbo deck doesn't mean I win turn 2, right? Like what makes a turbo deck good is this idea that not only can you win turn 2, but if things are not going correctly in the game, if you're playing against Italian and they have 3 mana up, and you know for a fact they are holding up mana because they're concerned about your board state, right? Like that is not a time where you jam, especially in a deck where you don't have traditional counter spells, right? We have Pyro and Red and Veil of Summer and Autumn's Veil, and we have Dosin and we have a Defense Grid, right? We have a lot of ways to protect our stuff, but it doesn't mean we always have it at that time. Deflecting Swat too. So finding those windows, so huge. And this is where cards like Crop Rotation come in, right? Or like Crop Rot for Emergence Zone is, I think, just in this deck specifically uncuttable. Like it is a perfect interaction for this deck. It finds you your window. It creates windows where it doesn't exist. It's the only way that this deck can be like, okay, cool, you respected me on my turn, but you disrespected me later. Here's my window, right? Final Fortune's kind of like that, right? But it doesn't, you know, give you that split second idea of like, no, I'm doing this on the stack. Even if someone's got a win on the stack right now, I can still push right here, right? As opposed to Final Fortune, which is just like, yeah, you're not getting a turn in between, I'm gonna get the turn, right? But that doesn't help with things, once again, on the stack, on the win, right? It's kind of the idea with the deck, as I mentioned, you know, and we'll talk about some of the things that I learned going through the tournament and some of the lessons that I learned playing this deck. But all in all, I was actually really, really happy with it. It was, you know, as I mentioned, it's a little bit more my style of turbo, which is like, if I'm gonna turbo, I'm gonna enjoy still playing creatures in my deck. And it was a blast. Genuinely, it was so much fun to play. I definitely think, you know, despite it kind of not being my normal-ish, that that Corvold might be a deck I bring every once in a while. I'll remind you here that we are co-sponsored this episode by Tales of Adventure Magic. If you want to get some amazing singles at really good prices, they are awesome. Go to toamagic.com. They also have a really cool in-person pickup. So if you are going to events like the Command Fest LA, Command Fest Dallas, any of those events, you can actually order online at toamagic.com and pick them up in person when they are there in store, ready at these events. So really cool options and availability. They have such a wide inventory, really solid store, and you can use code Comedian to get a discount off of your order. Round 1, we have in first seat Atraxa, myself in second seat, Itali in third seat, and Obnixilus in fourth, right? So immediately going into it, I do the same thing I identified with my previous run on Rogside, which is go boop, 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 boop. One blue deck in the pod. Itali is not stopping me. Obnixilus is not stopping me. I am pushing, right? I don't have the fastest turn in the world because my Dockside count isn't great, but I'm still shoving here, right? So Atraxa does multi-4 as well too, right? So for me, it's literally like, as soon as I get a hand that does the thing, ooh, I'm going for it, right? So Atali turn 1, or I just cast a Soul Ring. Atali turn 1 casts a Birds and a Jewel Lotus. And we're like, oh no. Ob just like land passes. Same thing for Atraxa, they land pass, I Imperial Seal, and then I'm Imperial Sealing and I'm like, wait a minute, Atali just did Birds into Jewel Lotus. Like, that's a turn to Atali, like goof. This big goof on my part, right? Just threw away an Imperial Seal, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put a junk card on top, right? So I immediately, and like as I'm going, like Atali's ready to take their turn, I'm like, yeah, okay, well, I'm just putting the thing on top, right? So I put on top a Simian Spirit Guide, right? And I'm like, yeah, if for some reason they don't cast Atali this turn, I draw that and it's fine, but like I don't think Atali does anything with a 2/2, right? So I'm like, okay, cool. Didn't really matter much anyways, because Atali gets out, they actually get out the Hellkite Courser, which allows you to put Atali in from the command zone. Atali does get in there. The Atali stack was like kind of cracked. I don't remember exactly what was in it. I know there was a Ranger Captain. The Simian obviously wasn't the big thing, but there was like a Black Tutor as well, right? So Atraxa's like, cool, one of my 4 cards that I kept was this Mindbreak Trap. And then so they just wipe the Atali stack, right? Then passes again after the Atali goes off. We later find out, ironically, in a similar boat to me, that they kept a Dockside hand. So they did not have it there, right? So they were just like kind of struggling because they assumed in a pod like this one that everyone was going to go a little heavier into the Dockside base permanents, but that did not happen. So Atraxa once again just passes with mana up. I play Corvold. I think I sack one of my lands and then draw a card. Then Atali sacks Atali to Eldritch Evolution. In comes the Hellkite Courser, which then allows them to put Atali in from the command zone. There's a big Atali stack, nothing like super insane, but the important thing is that off of Atali's own deck, they hit a Twin Flame. So then they Twin Flame, targeting the Atali, and Atraxa once again has the answer and Swords to Plowshares the Atali. And so that obviously fizzles the Twin Flame, and the whole time they were like, dude, I was saving that Swords for the Corvold. I really thought you were gonna run away with the game, like, et cetera, right? And so yeah, like that was definitely a bit of a blowout. And Atali sort of fizzles that at this point. Ob Nixilis plays a Dockside for 4, finally they get their Dockside out, and then they Cabal Ritual into Ob Nixilis. Atraxa, has been using nothing but removal and just passes the turn, right? I play Dockside at this point. It's not for a ton. I think it was like 4 or 5 at this point. But still like not a ton of stuff. Some of the important to note, like Atali had flipped over like a mana rock or 2 during one of its flips, right? So I get enough mana so that I'm able to Demonic Tutor for Food Chain because Squee was one of my draws for the turn, and I just go Food Chain Squee, and they're like, yeah, we were all out of gas, right? So and this is one of those examples, right, of a time where I think traditionally other cards are played in that spot, right? Like, as I mentioned, like other cards are played in this deck because people assumed that Food Chain wasn't really needed. But like, this is one of a couple examples of the day where having Food Chain in the deck was able to win in a window where none of my other win cons would have been able to do anything, right? Like, I could not set up a Technomancer line because I only had a single tutor. I could not set up a breach line that was going to be very effective. It would be really, really tight, and I had none of the pieces for breach, right? And it's like, well, yeah, you had Squee in hand. Obviously, it worked with the combo, right? But like the mana efficiency of being able to tutor and then play Food Chain, right? So it's 5 mana total, including the tutor, and then exile my creatures so that I can start going through the combo, right? Like I exile my own Dockside to Food Chain, and that's why Food Chain has that explosivity mana-wise that I think was very relevant for this window, because I just needed to get the Food Chain down and then everything else worked, right? So I do really feel like the Food Chain combo is just kind of needed in the modern version of Corvold, as I said, and this is definitely one of those examples where I'm like, I would not have been able to win with anything else. This is a weird one. So we have Talion in first seat, myself going second. We have Blue Farm in third seat, and Agila going fourth. So Talion right off the gates goes Dark Ritual, Demonic Tutor, play Jewel Lotus, play Talion. Agila's like, too many things. I'm not dealing with a turn 1 Talion, eat a Mindbreak Trap, right? So Talion gets cleared away. The hand that I kept was a weird one. It's like 5 lands, including a Gemstone Caverns and a Demonic Tutor, and then like not anything else. I think I had like one other spell, but it was like a removal spell, right? And I was like, I'm gonna keep this because I'm gonna see if this is a hand that works in this deck. And I was kind of like, my wheels were turning and I'm like, what do I even get here? And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I can just Demonic Tutor for Necropotence, right? Like that's the heuristic study of this deck, right? Like, let me just go get a thing that gets me a ton of card damage, right? Because mana clearly was not the problem, right? And important to note, one of the lands that I did have in this opener was Emergent Zone, right? So I was feeling pretty good about that part as well. So yeah, I'm like, all right, snap off the Necro. Like, let's start to make something happen. Let's start cooking, right? Blue farm on their turn. They're holding a Vampiric Tutor. Eventually they go get a Mystic Aurora for it. Najila plays Mana Vault. Done. Talion just passes because they got really blown out by like investing 4 resources into a turn 1 Talion. I play the Necropotence. I pay 5 into it. So I'm gonna have 5 in hand, pay 5. I'm like, sure, let's just get a couple cards, start sculpting, right? I don't have Corvold out. I don't have anything like super crazy, right? Like I'm just like, let's not just jam in a situation where I can't jam. And once again, dockside count at this point, I'm pretty sure is 1, right? Like this is really important. I'm pretty sure the Mana Vault is the only dockside permanent on this board, right? And I'm pretty sure the dockside count does not go above 3 for the entire game, I want to say. So that is very relevant for the lack of explosivity with this hand. Anyways, I pay 5, sculpt, exile 3 cards. I'm just kind of like, let's make something happen. You know what I mean? I'm just getting a little bit of gas, right? The blue farm player plays the Mystic Remora. Najila plays Chatterfang on their turn 2, which, you know, is gonna be a bit of a clock for me as the player with the Necropotence and no blockers, so I'm definitely keeping that in mind. At this point, the notes of this game, because this match ran rather long and I was, you know, recording things, it gets a little bit muddier from here, right? So basically what happens is Talion's still kind of just like, I think they end up tutoring again for a mana crypt just so they have anything going on. I think they have like a Gemstones as one of their lands too. So it's like that's one they top deck later on. So they're just struggling. I have another turn where I'm still kind of trying to set up. I like dig another 5 with Corvold. I play a couple rocks and stuff like that, but it's just like, it's not coming together, right? And also to be clear, like blue farm is just boop, cards in hand, Mystic Remora up, mana up, right? And I'm like, I have no Pyroblast, I have no Veil of Summer, I have no Docent, I have no Defense Grid, I have no Deflecting Swat, I don't have anything, right? So in this situation, I am shields down. If I go to jam something, I can try, but realistically, my mana's tight. I don't have anything good. I don't have a high dockside count. Like there's no way I'm jamming here, right? And people have mana open, including Talion and blue farm, right? Like I'm not gonna be a dummy and just be like, ooh, cast a bunch of spells, counter me, haha, right? So I just vibe, right? And especially with the E zone. I know I have an opportunity that'll come later, right? Goes to blue farm's turn. And at this point, I think they get a couple cards as we go around these rotations, right? So they're just like paying for the fish, kind of passing it up, being responsible. We get to Najila. Najila plays Najila and then starts swinging in with Chatterfang. And like, they're like, yeah, dude, you're on Necro, like wide open board state. I'm like, yeah, for sure makes sense. I get it. So they start chunking away at me. Talion just passes again, right? Holding up mana, doing the Talion thing, because you know they got blown out and they're just trying to stay in the game, right? I play Corvold at this point because I need to play Corvold at this point to get a blocker. And importantly, I sacrifice my Bayou because that's my only forest, and Chatterfang has Forest Walk, right? So now I'm like, yeah, dude, you can send in your Chatterfang, but it's getting eat by the dragon. So now I have a blocker. I can stem the bleeding a little bit, and then I think I Necro for 2, right? Just 2 cards, boop, put them in the hand. Blue farm lets the Remora die, and they go to jam. So this is where the game gets a little funky, because during some of this turns, there's a whole other turn in here somewhere. I think, oh yeah, because it's actually the turn before I cast Corvold. I actually Praetor's Grasp the blue farm player, and I take their Thassa's Oracle because I have a Tainted Pact in hand, right? And one of my thoughts was, if everyone's playing this responsible hand, like I don't know that I'm going to be able to, like, once again, dockside doesn't do jack shit. Praetor's Grasp is not getting me a food chain piece because that's not, no one else is playing food chain in this pod, right? So I'm like, that's not going to work, right? And so my game plan here really is to grab a Thoracle and then just try to Chain Impact Thoracle at instant speed because I have this emergent zone, right? So this happens once again the turn before I play Corvold, right? Then blue farm jams meme bet. And we get to the point where they're like, yeah, grab a tutor and like assemble some pieces, and they're really choked on mana, unfortunately, and their mana doesn't fix the cards in their own hand, right? So they can't go assemble a breach line. And it's like this whole thing where they're having a really weird situation where they're like, okay, cool, I can like start to assemble this, and they start, you know, counting and doing all that stuff. And, you know, not having Thoracle in the deck actually is a relevant factor. They did also figure that out the first time they like cracked a fetch after the Praetor's Grasp. They were like, oh, he took my Thoracle, I know for a fact, right? So that was very known information at this point, right? So they're sort of like looking through the deck, you know, putting a bunch of stuff together, using a bunch of the tutors in our graveyard. We don't have a lot of mana in the graveyard. We have a lot of tutors in the graveyard though. So they're like kind of like throwing stuff together. And like, okay, I got this, Final Fortune. We're all like, okay, sure, yeah, Final Fortune, good with me. Everyone do your thing, right? Talion had nothing at this point, and Gila had nothing at this point. They were tapped pretty low, right? And so they go into their next turn, right? And they start doing stuff, right? They go to put a breach on the play. They start cracking, breaching, you know, mill themselves, doing the thing. And I go, you know, hey, I don't, like, you know, this is a Final Fortune turn, right? And he's like, yeah, I got this, don't worry. And just starts like going through the line, milling a bunch of library. And I'm like, yeah, keep playing it out. Like I don't see a win condition, right? Because important to know, traditionally, if blue farm is not on Praetor's Grasp, right? They can potentially mill everybody out, right? With Brain Freeze, but then they die at the end of the Final Fortune turn. And therefore I win the game because I am last in turn order and I'm the last person to draw from their deck, right? So I was kind of trying to be nice and say like, hey, you're on a Final Fortune turn, don't do this thing, right? Because it would just like severely mess up the game, and like it's not really like what I'm trying to win a game on, right? I'm like, hey, you know, it's a Final Fortune turn, right? And then my other thought was, if they do have a very niche out there, by reminding them of the Final Fortune turn, there's a chance that they go, oh yeah, right, it's Final Fortune, I can't do anything, and then sort of just move on, right? So, but yeah, in general, I was trying to be a little nice and be like, hey, this is not how that works, right? And they're just like, no, don't worry, I got it. And they start like going through, and it turns out he was so hyper focused on the line that he didn't really like process what he meant by you're on a Final Fortune turn. So he like gets to the point where he mills Najeela for like 40. That resolves, and then he goes, oh, I'm on a Final Fortune turn. What's important to note about all this is that during the Mnemonic Betrayal turn, they had cast a culling ritual, right? Which wiped a lot of our boards. I still had Corvold and stuff like that, right? But like there's a lot of stuff in the graveyard. So Najeela's entire crazy board state was gone. But during the milling, Najeela also mills over Savine's Reclamation and Derevi, right? So now there's still, you know, because both Chatterfang and Najeela survive this whole iteration, right? And so it's just messy, right? It is a messy stack here at this point. Basically, what happens is Najeela's got like 40 cards. The game is altered at this point, right? Like significantly altered by the blue farm player's turn. And I go, hey, look, this is quite messed up. the whole board state's quite messed up. And to be clear, it wasn't like they could just flashback Sabines and win the game. Like it was even more like crunchy and clunky than that. I was like, the whole thing's messed up. Like Talion, you got, you know, blown out. You're kind of like struggle busting over here. I was like, you just got milled for 50 cards, and you know, this whole, you know, turn thing just like completely threw off the game. And I was like, I would be very comfortable with an intentional draw here because of how scuffed this board state was. And everyone's like, yeah, sure. Like everyone was like, it just seems like the best option for everybody involved. So, you know, Blue Farm obviously was frustrated with himself, but I think everyone walked away happy with that situation of just like, let's just call it an ID, move on, have a good rest of the day. And that's what we ended up doing. Round 3, Italy in first seat. Tivit in seat 2, Kambal, the new Kambal from Outlaws in seat 3, and then myself in 4th. Worst bad beats of the day by far. I keep a Mull 4. That is not a good Mull 4. It is 2 lands, a Grim Monolith, and an Ad Nauseam. Italia plays a Mana Crypt. Tivit plays turn 1, Blind Obedience. So now my hands is 2 lands, a tapped Grim Monolith, and an Ad Nauseam. I'm like, oh no, this is not my game to win. I'm already mentally chalking up the first loss of the day, but, and I tell people this all the time, even if you're in that state, you know, you can vocalize like, woof, I am definitely out of this game, right? But don't actually mentally put yourself there, right? Because it's not gonna help. You gotta play to your outs, all of that stuff, right? And then there's a lot of games still to be had in this game for sure. But I was definitely, what's farther back than starting on the back foot? I don't know, starting back a country mile for sure. Tivit does that, Korvold just plays a turn 1 Sarah Ascendant. I play a land, pass the turn. Natali plays a tapped Jeweled Lotus. They were like, yeah, I was trying to sandbag my mana rocked. I really wanted that turn to Natali. They got blown up by the Blind Obedience. Tivit then, to uber punish the tapped Jeweled Lotus, plays a turn 2 Dranith. So there goes my potential grind engine if eventually I get the mana. I'm like, oh my goodness. So I got Blind Obedience into Dranith. Korvold holds up their mana, and I did draw a Wish Claw on turn 1. So I'm like, you know, of all the ways to get blown out, this is not the least bad, right? Like we can make something at least kind of happen here, right? So I play a tapped Wish Claw, pass the turn. Atali kills Dranith, plays Atali, eats a Mind Break Trap from Tivit. Tivit is just on it with responsible interaction. It's crazy for this game. Like this Tivit deck is just like, you are not doing stuff. Then we get to Tivit's turn and they Savines back the Dranith that Atali just killed. Like Atali and I are both like, please, no. Cabal doesn't really do anything. They're kind of like doing this like very patient gameplay thing with their deck, and I think it worked out pretty well for them in general. I think that was like a really cool like tempo-y attrition thing. And obviously every time they're beating in with the Sarah Ascendant as well too, right? I do not have a land drop, but I did draw a Bowmasters this turn cycle, right? So I want to hold up the Bowmasters, but I'm like, I think I can get more value out of the situation, right? So I look at Tivit, who, you know, they've been Dr. Cop, they've been stopping a bunch of stuff, right? But they haven't progressed their board state a ton. They haven't like really advanced a lot, right? And I think they're kind of like relying on getting Tivit to refill them after expending so many resources stopping everybody else, right? So I look at Tivit and I go, I'm gonna activate this Wish Claw to get a command tower. Can you pass it back when you're done? If you, and I was like, and also like, you know, what can you let me know that you'd potentially go get? And they were like, honestly, I'm trying to get Tivit. If I don't draw a mana source, I go get a mana source here. And I was like, honestly, probably the best deal I'm gonna get, right? Realistically, there's a solid chance that they, you know, given the way the decks work, like it's like kind of like a coin flip on whether they draw a mana source and like push it, right? So I'm like, that's the best deal I'm gonna get. It's like they get a mana source, comes back to me. Worst case scenario, they draw a mana source, they go get something greedy. It's still not my problem. I'm in fourth. I'm desperate at this point, right? Also, by going and getting a command tower, I'm able to hold up the Bowmasters, which is important, right? Like I was able to go get a land, grab it, play the land, still have that 2 mana up while still advancing my board state, right? Hence the sort of decision making at this point. I do think it was a heads up play, and I think it did give me a lot of advantage going into this game. So I go, cool, pass the claw. I go get command tower, hold up OBM, pass the turn, Orcish Bowmasters. Atali is locked under a Dranith and a Blind Obedience, so they just pass the turn. So they do unfortunately draw, Tivit draws an Ancient Tomb, and therefore they go to crack the Wish Claw, obviously up to get something rather nefarious. Luckily, Korvold goes Opposition Agent. Now this was a super heads up play in my opinion from this Korvold deck, right? They had said like realistically they didn't think a lot of the cards in my deck got them a lot of advantage, which I did agree with pretty wholeheartedly. And if I was just going to get a land like I was saying I was doing, and they've played with me a couple times, so they kind of like knew that I'm not someone who lies, right? And I was like, I'm literally going and getting command tower, right? So by like giving into that and by like believing in the table talk of the table, they were able to snag the Tivit's tutor. Unfortunately, Tivit then also has a tainted pact. So they tainted backed for a Chain of Vapor because that was the first like removal of any kind they found. They Chain of Vapor the Opposition Agent, right? So it's back in Cabal's hand. Tivit gets 1 tutor, but they completely tap themselves out to even interact in this moment, right? So like, yeah, the Opposition Agent didn't land, Tivit gets a tutor, but they also completely got time walked. So like, in my opinion, I think it's still a really good exchange for the Opposition Agent player who still has an oppo in hand, to be clear. Yeah, and then that exchange happens. Cabal sort of just holds up opposition agent mana again, goes to combat with Saracen and passes. End step, I flash in Bowmasters. Nothing is small enough to be relevant to ping off with it. I'm just like, I'm going to get it down. I'm not going to be holding up mana, etc. There's a couple plays at this point where the table just starts going around and making some like very minor game actions, not really doing a whole lot. It sort of becomes clear as time goes on that combat damage is going to be very relevant for this game, right? So there is a whole period where, because Atali's still on the board, to be clear. They got the MBT happened, right? So Atali's on the board chunking in at Tivit, because Tivit was the perceived threat for a lot of the game, and also the deck that was stopping Atali. Then it kind of starts shifting, like, I want to say like feeling wise, to where it's like, okay, Kambal's slowly draining everybody out. Tivit's like doing the thing, but they're so low on life total that like they're gonna die any second. And then who wins in that vacuum, right? Is it Atali? Is it Kambal? You know what I mean? I think Kambal definitely has this opposition agent at one point. I do play the tapped Grim Monolith in hopes that I can untap it later and play something else to get me more advantage, right? That eventually does happen. I do play it, I untap it, and just the whittling of life totals is just like everybody gets hit just a little bit, right? I eventually am down to 22 life, and Kambal is definitely at this point starting to run away with things. Tivit and Atali and I are all under the understanding that Kambal's running away with things because they have a Mirkwood Bats and a Smothering Tithe, right? So basically anytime one of us does not pay for a draw, it's 2 to the face. And our life totals were already kind of low because it was a sloggy game with a Tivit and Natali going into combat a lot. I was just dying to natural stuff. There was a Bowmasters that didn't really do anything, unfortunately, because no one was drawing cards when we needed them to. And we are just attritioning each other so crazy, right? Like his life is just draining, and Kambal is just killing us. They're killing us with a Mirkwood Bats. And it gets a little clunky at this point. We're like figuring something out, and I'm at 22 life with a Mirkwood Bats, Kambal, Smothering Tithe combo, and I'm like, dude, I gotta do something. I'm trying to be responsible here at this table, but when I said this to Atali and Tivit, I was like, I'm gonna go for something here because I think we're just dead and there's nothing I can really do about it at this point. And they're like, yeah, no, I get it, right? So I jam an Adnaz at 22 with a Mirkwood Bats and a Smothering Tithe on the table, right? I believe this is on my turn. So also remember, right, like I have a bunch of mana at this point because, the game has gone a while, right? So I'm able to jam this Adnaz and I still have 4 mana remaining, right? There is still an opposition agent on this field. There's the Blind Obedience that we talked about since turn 1. There's a Drandith Magistrate. And there's a Manglehorn that Atali played in the middle of this, which got swept up in the description because at that point it was a redundant effect and it wasn't even relevant, but now it's very relevant. So I Nas from 22, and as far as Nauses from 22 in a deck like Corvold are concerned, it was not bad. It was like actually pretty good, and the highlight of which being that I had a Calling Ritual, right? So I'm able to get a bunch of mana, all that stuff, but the other problem with it is I have just so many tutors. And there's still an Oppo, and I have no way to trigger the Bowmasters to kill it before we get this Nas thing going off, and I'm just like, dang, I am SOL. And even if I, culling and then reanimate my Bowmasters and like do a bunch of stuff, it just does not matter, unfortunately. So at one point I get so deep in the tank, I try to entomb, forgetting about the Oppo. They take something of mine, I don't remember even what it was, and it didn't really matter that much. I think I end up stopping around like 5 or 6 life, because once again, there's the whole Mirkwood Bat situation literally right next to me, right? So I think I'm at 6. And so it's kind of just a slog of a Calling Ritual. I end up making like 20 or 30 mana because of how many things are on the board, and it just does not matter whatsoever. Important to know, I make so much mana because all of the treasures and stuff, all of these things are coming in tapped. I think Atali also had played a Dockside into the Blind Obedience the turn before, right? And we did get it confirmed, had I not Calling Ritual there, they were just winning that game. Like no ifs, ands, or buts about it, even with all the stacks pieces on board. So yeah, I make like 30 mana with this Calling Ritual, but it's only in green and black. And because I can't tutor, I have no way to get the rest of my stuff. I'm just stuck, and it sucks, and I have nothing. So I do a bunch of small stuff, like play a bunch of dorks and things like that, and I play Necromancy to reanimate the Serra Ascendant, but unfortunately, as I'm at a low life, it's not the 6/6 flyer, and I'm just going to die before combat damage is going to matter anyways. It's pass to Atali. Atali has nothing at this point except for a Manglehorn. Pass to Tivit. At that point, you know, there's been paying for some of these treasures that are going to be killing us, and I'm basically saying, hey Tivit, like let's dig and dig and dig, and if you can get an answer for this Mirkwood Bats, like, you know, I'm not going off because I just tried and it didn't work, right? But like I can at least start to like help you out here. I mean, if we can survive the triggers for Mirkwood Bat, if Mirkwood Bat goes away, there's a chance I can live through combat and go through my turn, right? Because I had enough blockers and in combat tricks and stuff like that. So I was like, I can actually live through my turn, right? But Tivit draws. In response to the Smothering Tide trigger, they draw again, and they hit nothing, unfortunately. And the game ends to all of us getting drained out by a Mirkwood Bats from Cabal. So yeah, my first loss of the day to Mirkwood Bats, which was pretty crazy. This next game kind of played out a little weird. So I'm in third seat, Joyra's in first seat, Rogsize in second seat, myself in third, and Malcolm Vile in fourth seed. Now Malcolm Vile mulls down to 5, and they have definitely like a very clunky 5. Like you can tell by the way they're kind of just acting like they're not happy with the 5 they have. So Joyra and Rogsai both start with crack a fetch land, go get a surveil land hands, right? I just play a Tinderwall and pass. Malcolm Vile plays a Siren Storm Chamber and a Mox Amber. Joyra plays the an artifact land of import, and the Aeronaut card, which is the card that is an artifact dude that reduces the cost of playing artifacts, right? Really cool storm card in Joyra, definitely a scary piece to have on the board, allows you to go off of Sensei's top, etc., etc. Very, very big, powerful, scary card. Rogsai plays Rog and passes. So this is like the slowest Rogsai start I've ever seen. It kind of found out later they kept a very responsible hand, right? Like they're trying to, you know, just gain a bunch of value as the game goes on, kept a lot of interaction, all that stuff, which definitely was not expecting from the Rogsai deck. I cast Deathrite Shaman and I pass, and I'm holding up the combination of Entomb and Noxious Revival with the hope that I can Entomb my Dockside, Noxious Revival back to the top of my library, and go to play it. Jorah plays Rhystic Study. In response, I cast my Entomb. I don't cast my Noxious because I don't really want to like be transparent about when I'm going, even though I know I'm going to give Jorah a card. I kind of want to like have that ambiguity a little bit. Rogsai casts Bergi, passes to me. I Noxious the Dockside back on top of my library. I play Dockside for only 5, right? Like 5 is solid, obviously, but like definitely not crazy. I play Corvold, and it eats a Force of Will from Joyra, and I luckily have the backup plan of just playing Necropotence. Like, yeah, this is great. I'm happy with this being my backup plan, right? Got very lucky there for that reason, for sure. I believe I had a Jeweled Lotus here, which is how I got the Corvold out even earlier. So I draw 8 cards at this point because I'm already down to like 2 cards, I think. And what's important is that I do have Crop Rotation in my hand, right? So Crop Rotation will allow me to go grab the Emergence Zone, meaning that next turn I can like Necro for 25 to 30 and just get there. Malcolm Vile gambles for Jeweled Lotus. They discard the Jeweled Lotus and they pass. They're having a bad game. I felt so bad for them. Now it's important. I did play a bunch of these cards into a Rhystic Study, right? So Jorah is primed to just start popping off here, right? They have the Rhystic. They finally get Jorah down, and they put Jorah on the stack. And the way they sequenced everything, it looked very clear that Jorah plus 8 cards in hand, and the way they were playing was very meticulous, right? Like they weren't playing Jorah super early, they weren't playing a bunch of rocks to get Jorah out early, right? They're playing Jorah in a way where it was very clear, as soon as Jorah hits the field, it's free rock, you know, play a thing, Underworld Breach, all that stuff, right? And specifically with the fact that they had the Aeronaut on board, reducing the cost of all their artifacts, any 0 or 1s off the top of their library are either, you know, costing nothing or netting them mana, right? So very scary place for Jorah. We found out later that had Jorah resolved, we were dead. We were just dead. So what happens next is very, very justified. So Rogsai forces the Jorah. Jorah responds with the Pact, and then Rogsai Force of Negations that. So Rogsai double forces just to keep the table alive. Jorah plays a Mox Diamond, passes the turn. Rogsai plays a Mystic Remora. In response to that, Jorah Mystical Tutors a Mindbreak Trap going into my turn, right? So I go And on my main phase, I play the crop rotation, go get the E zone, right? I have 5 cards in hand at this point, right? And one thing I know for a fact is that there is this Mindbreak trap here. There's also a Mystic and a Ristic, right? So I'm like, okay, Jorah has no mana. They tutored for this Mindbreak trap. They are trying to stop me if I go for it, right? Or they were trying to stop Rogsai, who just double forced, right? Like, but they're kind of assuming that either one of us has the win here, right? So the crop rotation happens, and we're just kind of doing this thing, right? So before I even go to do the Necropotence draws, I gamble for a red Elemental Blast, which, you know, it's arguable that I could have also done this in response to anything that happened later on. Now that I kind of think about it, after the game is like done, but I still think I was happy with my sequencing here. But I had 5 in hand. There was a chance that I did pitch something, but I go grab the red blast because I don't have an answer for the Mindbreak trap, and I don't want to gamble, ironically, on not having some sort of interaction in the top cards of my library, right? Like, I want to be able to have an answer for this Mindbreak trap, right? So I pitch one of the extra cards in my hand. Don't really remember what it was. I think it was nothing else in my hand really mattered. It was just this gamble, right? So I have the red blast. I go 24 deep, right? Leaving myself with, I believe, 4 mana, right? And I start just casting a couple mana rituals, right? Like ritual. They're drawing a fish and Remora the whole, or fish and Ristic Study the whole time, right? I'm just like, yep, draw your cards, all that stuff, right? I know that whatever they can do, I can respond to top of it, right? And I know the Mindbreak trap is waiting, and the Mindbreak trap player knows that I know that that's waiting, right? So they're waiting for the things that they actually need to counter, right? Like, they're kind of convinced that hitting any of these mana rituals is not actually going to cut me off anything, which is true. It's absolutely true. There was no choke point mana wise, so they were very good to read that was not the case. Luckily, I do have enough mana where I play Dosin, and Dosin immediately eats that Mindbreak trap. I go to protect it with the red Elemental Blast. They have nothing. So I've drawn them like 5 or 6 cards at this point, but yeah, they're both tapped out. Rog used 2 forces, Jorah used a force and a pact, and I know they have a Fierce Guardianship in hand because it almost got played earlier during the counterspell fight, but obviously there was no Jorah out. Jorah was still on the stack, so they couldn't use the Fierce, right? So I know the free interaction in hand, I know it's available, and I know that they're pretty low on it, so I'm like, yeah, let's jam this Dosin here, right? I protect it with the red blast, and then I proceed to continue just like casting stuff, storming, casting stuff. They're drawing cards. I'm super chill with it. No one has Order War mana, so I'm not worried about that part. And I get to the point where I assemble the Technomancer. I'm like, oh yeah, I can start looping now. And I'm like, wait, I need the Skirk to sack Atlas, so I bring back the Dockside. And then I go tutor for the Skirk Prospector, and I assemble the Technomancer line, draw through my entire deck, and start killing people in Mayhem Devil. And yeah, simple as that. It was a crazy game, but definitely a wild one for sure. So that was the last round of Swiss, right? Once again, 4-round cut to top 10. Luckily, I have a 2-1-1 record at this point. I have 11 points, and everyone else that had 2 wins or something like that is only at 10 points, right? And I think there's one other 11, but I have a better set of breakers than them. So what happens is there's one player with 3 wins, 1 loss. They get first place, and then I come in at the 11 points at 2-1-1. And so I get to skip the semifinals, another tournament where top 10 cut works out in my favor, jump right to the finals match, and going in second seat in the finals. So it is Tevesh Krom in first, our 3-1 player Zach, myself in second on Corvold, then Kenrith in 3rd spot, and Blue Farm in 4th spot. So Tevesh Krom has one of the craziest opening plays I have ever seen in my entire life. They proceed to go Mystic Remora, and we're like, yeah, sure, makes sense. Mana Crypt, Felwar Stone, Mox Opal. All of us are like, okay, cool. Good to know there's a threat at the table. Luckily, there's enough green in this pod where we're not super punished. I go Mana Dork pass. Kenrith goes pass with mana up. Blue Farm, because they had Gemstone Cavern, plays a turn 1 Lotho. No fish triggers. We're loving that. We are not letting us get punished by this turn 1 Remora with 4,000 mana. Blue Farm goes, I pay for fish and play Krom, because they had 6 mana on turn 2. I go Deathrite Shaman, hold up Orcish Bowmasters, right? I have Bowmasters in hand, ready to kind of like punish the Mystic Remora draws. Kenrith goes to their main phase, and they just main phase a Bowmasters. They just get it down. They get it down right away. Comes in, pings, obviously, to Veshkram. And actually, I think it pings the Lotho, now that I think about it. Yeah, it did ping the Lotho. So it actually takes out the Lotho. Without Lotho ever having triggered too, which is kind of funny. And then Kenrith, yeah, does that. And then we go to Blue Farm. Blue Farm goes, yeah, turn 2 Rhystic Study. So they have a pretty good start too, right? Turn 2 Rhystic after a turn 1 Lotho, pretty solid. Veshkram plays Vesh, triggers Rhystic. In response, I flash in my Bowmasters, shoot down Kenrith's Bowmasters, and then start pinging Veshkram in the face. Then we go to my turn, and I'm like, okay, this situation is kind of untenable. I don't know what I'm really gonna do here to be able to break through. Maybe I just see how far I can get with a Dockside. I have a Worldly Tutor in hand. I'm like, you know what? I got a Worldly Tutor, got a Jeweled Lotus. Let's get Corvold out, make some stuff happen, right? Just see. And I do. I Worldly Tutor on my upkeep. Nobody responds. They draw their cards. I'm like, okay, cool. Play Dockside. And everyone's like, yeah, Dockside's cool. Rhystic Study draws their card. I'm like, sick. Okay. Corvold. Jeweled Lotus first, right? They draw their cards. Yep, cool. Good. Corvold's all good. I'm like, okay. It's already farther than I thought I was gonna get. We're loving this, right? And there's also like some conversation about like, what point do you start interacting with the Corvold player? Like, when do things get scary? I think it happens after this, right? So I play Corvold, sack the Dockside, right? Everyone's like, yeah, sure, that's fine. No one's blowing me out here on this one, right? And this is the point where I think, had they had something, this is where they need to push, right? So I go to unearth the Dockside, reanimating it, bringing it back to my field. And that happens with like everyone having like 6 or 7 cards in hand. And I'm like, no, there's no way. There's no way this just happened, right? I'm like, no, absolutely not. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. Get a bunch of treasures? And they're like, for sure. I'm like, okay. All right, I'm gonna keep going. And I just start like doing stuff, right? I play a Skirk Prospector, which gives Rhystic a trigger, but like immediately refunds itself because you get the Corvold, get the trigger, sack the Dockside, immediately like make the mana and then refresh that whole thing. So Skirk Prospector is literally free, draw a card in this scenario. I'm like, rock and roll. And I just start cracking treasures, drawing cards, crack treasure, draw a card, crack treasure, draw a card, sack Dockside, draw a card, get another reanimation spell, try it again. Still happens. I'm like, okay, wow, we're just off to the races, right? Get Dockside back, crack draw, crack draw, crack draw. Yeah, so to reanimate there, to be clear, I tainted, pacted, got down, and I was kind of like looking for some sort of thing to like make it turn the corner, make me kind of like pop off, and I hit Finale of Devastation. I was like, honestly, we'll just use that to reanimate the Dockside, to be clear. So that's the thing, I get to reanimate the Dockside. I wasn't sure that one was going to resolve because Finale is like, it gets hit by a decent amount of stuff, right? People are low on mana is the important part. Rhystic Study is tapped out. Get the Dockside back in the battlefield, floating a bunch of mana, and one of the cards that I hit is Besage You. So at this point, I go, cool, let's Besage You, hit that Rhystic Study. And I was sweating about that choice. It stressed me out a lot because there's 2 realities, right? Is either A, Rhystic Study draws them into a piece for like a force or a pact or a Mindbreak Trap. From this point on, they can just start being very, very scary, right? Or B, I Besage You them, close up the Rhystic, but it opens up 1 mana blue or white interaction, right? So I'm very nervous about that happening, right? And they do go grab a Tundra off of it, and I'm like, oh god, I'm dead. Like, I've flown too close to the sun, like I messed up, right? Eventually though, I'm still cracking treasures, making mana, doing the thing, keep going, right? I draw Squee, and I draw Diabolic Intent, and I'm like, all right, Diabolic Intent's the last one, sack my Dockside to Diabolic Intent. Do I have it? And Diabolic Intent resolves, and I go grab Food Chain. And so this is another one of those times where any other win con in the deck at this point, I don't know that I can actually win the game with. There's a world where maybe grabbing Technomancer means that I can like play Techno, sack Corvold, reanimate, you know what I mean? And like maybe get that loop going, but I don't know if the Dockside count's actually high enough where I can execute that loop, right? So just once again, another situation where Food Chain straight up saves me the potential of winning this game. So Food Chain hits the table. There's one last Remora draw. Nobody has the answer because everyone's tapped down, right? And I'm able to execute the Food Chain combo and kill my opponents. Yay. GG's with Corvold. My first time ever playing Corvold. Like I've never even played it in a pickup game before. Never touched the deck. except for maybe some goldfishes online. So going from literally never having played a tournament to winning a bronze event with it was pretty cool. I really had fun with Corvold. It was a good deck. I really enjoyed playing it. I do like, as I mentioned, been very high on the food chain stuff, will continue to be very high on the food chain stuff in the deck, but I do think genuinely, like, if I have to play a turbo deck in the near future, this is the thing I'm gonna be looking at. I really enjoy the play patterns of it. It feels like it still retains that creature combo goodness that I really vibe with as a player, while, having those explosive plans, having the ability to punish players who are tapping low for resources, right? Like literally what happened in that finals pod, right? While still having, A+B combos, a lot of good value stuff, and then just having the broken dockside interaction, right? Like that's the craziest part about the deck is like at any point, if your opponents mess up and give you a high enough dockside count, which cannot stress enough, was not more than 4 for the entire day. I'm definitely excited to continue playing it. I think it was a fun time, a really cool deck, and just excited to keep going with it. Thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoy videos like this, make sure to hit that like button, that subscribe button. As I mentioned everything earlier with Patreon, if you're interested in cEDH coaching, that is what I do full time. I have had a very good streak recently. 2 weekends in a row, I was able to win a tournament and top 4 a tournament within the same weekend. This weekend with the turbo decks was definitely some smaller tournaments, but was able to win and top cut a 50 something and a 70 something player tournament 2 weekends in a row. So definitely on a good streak right now. The coaching is going awesome. We have gameplay coaching for folks who are interested in, getting that feedback directly from their games. And there's one-on-one coaching for deck help and for strategy help and stuff like that. So if anybody is interested in any of those things, it is always free to just DM me, comedianmtg@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube, all of those places. Just shoot me a message. As I mentioned, comedianmtg@gmail.com is the easy one. comedian_mtg over on Discord, and @comedianmtg on Twitter. And @comedianmtg on Instagram, I think too. I have to double check the Instagram one. But find me in any of those places, shoot me a DM, and we can set something up. As I said, they've been going really, really well lately. A lot of my coaching recipients have been doing well in tournaments, so it's been awesome, and I'm excited to hear from you all if you're interested. Also, we might be doing something special when Modern Horizons comes out, but I'll wait till I have the official stuff for that. Thank you all for watching this video. If you like it, hit like, subscribe, all that stuff. Have an amazing week. I'll catch you next time. Peace.
Get up.